So you're looking to paint your house white, as in the exterior or outside of your house. As great of an idea as that sounds, you do not want to make a major costly mistake. So stick around, because in this video, I'm going to talk about my process in picking the perfect white paint color, a couple examples of some that I like, and I'll also tell you a major consideration that you need to know before committing to any of them. Not sponsored. I really like white paint colors, or specifically off-whites, because of the fact that they're nice and clean and really minimal. This goes for the inside or the outside of the home, and you really see a lot of people that utilize that farmhouse aesthetic, especially modern farmhouse, going for some of these white paint colors. What's nice about white as an exterior choice is that it looks really clean, as long as you keep it clean, but it's also something that looks great on siding, stucco, and even brick. So when I am deciding on a white paint color for the outside of a home, the first consideration I make is, do I want more of a white or maybe an off-white? When it comes to paint colors, these are sort of lumped into the same category for me, because honestly, I don't think there's any such thing as a pure white paint color. You can have some that will look a lot closer to white in practicality, like high reflective white, for example, but then you have a color like Shoji White by Sherwin-Williams, which, even though it has white in the name, it is more of a true off-white because it has the added colorant and the lower light reflectance value. So I guess the first question you can ask yourself is, do I want my white clean or a little bit dirty? And I don't mean dirty in a bad way, not like muddy. Muddy is a bad term for a paint, but dirty, that's all right. I can roll with that. Dirty can be really good sometimes with paint colors, because it just means there's a little more to it saturation-wise. You may want your off-white to be infused a little bit with beige or gray or brown or taupe. So for my off-white fans watching, the people that are open to that, I try to stick around a 70 to 80 LRV range. And if you're unsure what LRV stands for, I'm just talking about the light reflectance value. And that's a number between 0 to 100. It's actually a percentage. And as that number approaches 100, that means a color will appear lighter. So some of the brightest whites by companies like Behr, Sherwin-Williams, or Benjamin Moore end up being in the low to mid 90s. I've yet to see one that's a pure 100. Pretty sure that's impossible. So by staying around that 70-ish range, you'll end up with a paint color that has some noticeable undertones to it, but will still feel pretty light, all things considered. A color like White Duck, for example, ends up being a beautiful, warm, neutral off-white that will show a moderate amount of color when used outside, but will still kind of read as white. The sun is a phenomenal light source, way better than your trendy, vintage-looking Edison bulbs that you might be using inside. So there won't be any risk of an off-white feeling too dark outside. It's the opposite. It's gonna look a lot lighter. I enjoy White Duck's combination of beige and gray to create this really soft and subtle look overall. Shoji White is a color that is nearly identical to White Duck. And what's funny is they're both made by Sherwin-Williams. They both have a 74 light reflectance value, which is identical, and a nearly identical set of undertones. The slight difference between them is Shoji White, to me, just has a touch more of a red undertone rather than a slight green one, but it's honestly the subtlest of differences. They both will appear pretty greigey, all things considered. Greige is gray and beige, if you didn't know. Okay, now you know. If you're one of those people that are choosing between these two colors right now, just save yourself the trouble and flip a coin. Benjamin Moore's Sea Pearl is another well-liked exterior off-white that lives in that mid to high 70s LRV range. So it's still not quite as stark and crisp of a white, but will feel really clean and vibrant on the exterior of your house. These are all colors that will also contrast really nicely against much darker colors. So if you wanted to either have a deeper main body color or some accenting trim, you could totally use these in place of a more traditional white paint, and they'll still look pretty white. Compared to Shoji White, Sea Pearl does have a hint more of a green undertone, so just be aware of that. Now, what if you didn't want to get dirty and you wanted to keep your white paints looking a bit cleaner, but still have some form of undertone present? Well, in that case, you could bump up the old LRV a bit and venture into the low 80s range. You may ask yourself, okay, well, do I want something cool or something warm? I think for many of you, and this is just personal preference here, I wouldn't even really look at the cooler whites out there. I know it seems harsh that I'm essentially ignoring half of your possible options, But what you need to remember is daylight casts a really cool or even blue coloration onto whatever paint color you're going with. This means that warmer creams can feel a little closer to kind of a neutral off-white, and then those neutral whites can feel a bit cooler, which means the cooler whites will look a little cool gray bluey, which could be a thing if you're into that, but it may not be what you were expecting. So if you wanted a white paint color with some crispness to it, my suggestion is pick a color with a cool sounding name, but isn't actually all that cool temperature-wise. I hope that made sense. So we're going with Snowbound, which sounds cool, right? Snow, that's cold. But actually it's pretty soft and it doesn't really have any blue or green undertones playing through. It sort of plays it safe with its undertones, but will not ever feel overly warm or creamy if that's what you're trying to avoid. It's going to feel brighter than the previous colors we spoke about and definitely closer to a pure white. Personally though, I do gravitate towards warmer whites outside, mainly because of that blue color cast that the sun is known to bring forth. So one of my go-tos is Swiss Coffee by Behr. And there is a color with the same name by Benjamin Moore that is extremely similar, and I've used them interchangeably with little to no issue. You have to remember that a color like Swiss Coffee may seem yellowy or creamy on the inside, but outside, its 84 LRV will keep it feeling extremely bright and pleasant. So what about my big piece of advice for you? My word of caution. Well, if you've been noticing, the colors I'm suggesting are all under 85 LRV, or light reflectance value. The thing is, I've not always been a fan of going with the brightest white in a lot of cases, just because it's a decision that sort of lacks, I don't know, nuance for me. This is even more the case with exterior painting, because not only are undertones prone to being washed out by sunlight, which will happen outside, your bright whites are also going to look extremely bright, almost to an exaggerated degree. If you're only using them on smaller parts of the home, like your trim or your frames, that's one thing. But putting high reflective white on the entire body of your house without any shade from nearby trees especially, it's going to look extremely aggressive. This could work for you. Everything could technically work, but just from my experience, you may want something a little softer. I would instead recommend a color like Benjamin Moore's Decorator's White, which isn't quite as vibrant as you can get, but still extremely clean and simple. Even something like Alabaster by Sherwin-Williams, it's an incredible white paint color to use outside that maybe won't feel quite as stark as Decorator's. Now that you have an idea of which white to go with, I can also provide you with some color combos in this video right over here. That way you can start to piece together your overall exterior color palette.